This is Andrea with Parking Lot Debrief. All right. Excited to be here with my friend. I've got Michelle Mansfield-Hom. And I guess we can just jump right in. Hand it over to you to say who you are, what you want to share with everyone about you, of who you are.
Great. I'm so happy to be here with you, Andrea. Yeah, it's just good to sit and have this conversation with you. So, I am Michelle, as you just mentioned, and in my everyday life, I am a clinical herbalist. I have my own business, private practice, where I'm seeing clients and sitting in session with them, working with them to make sure that they get a personalized protocol that really aligns with their needs. I do that through a variety of things: herbs, teas, tinctures, food and nutrition, exercise, mobility, all of that. So I sit with clients and work on that. Outside of that piece of my business, I also provide workshops and presentations about truly anything as it relates to the body systems, the nervous system, the digestive system, stress, anxiety. I present on a whole myriad of topics because we have to understand each part of ourselves, right? Each system to really understand what it means to be a full and healthy, functioning human, right? We can't just ignore or neglect these different parts of ourselves. We are a whole and a holistic being. And so I think it's important to focus on all aspects, right? We can't parse or pick and choose what we want. We have to look at ourselves as a whole, and something that is a real main pillar of my practice and my business, and something that I'm really passionate about, and something that I really want to share and give to the community. The deaf community historically has not had a lot of access. There's a lot of misinformation or inaccess to information. And obviously, captions are one thing, but and it's better, I guess, with AI-ish. But even AI captions really do not replace the knowledge of herbalism or studying in school with direct access. And so I don't want to keep going on about that, but I went to Colorado School of Clinical Herbalism, and that is how I met you, Andrea. Yeah, you beautiful and great interpreter. I love you. Yeah, I love you, Andrea. But that's how we met. And yeah, I also make products as well. I sell products on my website, and these are on demand, ready to order for people if they want to purchase something without fully committing to sitting in session with me. If they need something, you know, currently, just acute and they need some relief, I want to make sure that that is accessible and also affordable. Yes,
Mhm.
namely affordable. So I think that is what I do in a nutshell.
I love it. So, I guess in general, why would a person want to meet with you? What are you going to help me with, or what would you give me? Because there's a lot of areas in terms of holistic doctors or neuro or whatever, different names for that type of area. Why would I come see you?
Yeah, that's a good question. Clients typically come to me for any number of reasons. I've noticed, I would say I'm more drawn to the
Mm.
nervous system health, anxiety, depression, um, hormonal imbalances, neurotransmitters potentially affecting sleep or anxiety or other problems. Also, gut health, people who are also just, yeah, looking to heal their gut if they have some sort of imbalance. Really, people come to me with a, a variety, really anything. People can come to me with anything. And then we can, provide that initial consultation, figure out if we're a good match to continue working together. And it also, depends on the client's needs, where they're at, what support they're currently getting from Western medicine. Oftentimes, there's a team of medical providers who are providing care to an individual, right? You've got your PCP, your primary care provider, and other folks, other forms of care providers. And so making sure that I am a good fit with that care team. And sometimes it's not the right time now, but maybe later in the future it is the right time. But typically people come to me with, just an acute illness, right? If they've got COVID, or if they've broken their leg or their arm, or they've got an upcoming surgery, or they're recovering from surgery,
Yeah.
just basically to help their bodies heal at its own natural speed, just providing it a bit of support with that natural process, the body's natural process.
Why did you start herbalism school? What motivated you to go to school? I don't know if I even know this story. Why'd you start that?
Yeah, really. I mean, me, like many others, are really frustrated and fed up with Western medicine and just the approach that Western medicine typically provides, right? It's like, okay, you've got 2 minutes, come in to see me, and what do you have? What do you need? Okay, good to go. You're out of here. I'm going to write your prescription and send you on your way. And I felt like that was really not solving any problems, right? That was looking so like solely at one specific issue and just tuning into that and treating that without even considering any other aspects or contributing factors.
Hmm.
And so for that reason, I just felt really fed up. And I felt like I had healed myself. I had all these problems. I was really struggling to figure out what was going on, what was the root cause. And so I decided to just make one simple change to my diet by limiting dairy, and everything, and I mean everything, changed for me. And I thought, why couldn't one doctor just fucking tell me to just
Right,
remove that one thing from my
right.
diet? And so I felt angry after that. And so I turned to herbs, after that process, researching things more. And I really just felt enamored with farming and gardening. I've worked on many farms over the years, and that was something that just lit the fire for me. I thought the deaf community as a whole, just deaf people don't have access to these resources, to this information. And
No.
it took me years and years until I finally realized that, okay, that is not okay and that needs to change. And I want to be the person who's going to go to herb school, who's going to be, fully immersed in this field. And I am going to be a credible source. I am going to be an established source, you know, of information and provide my own practice to help others. Yeah.
And now you're doing it. You are doing it. Legit.
Yes.
I know it's probably hard to
Yeah.
set up your own business, get everything in place. Yeah, so all of that obviously is good just for general human beings. All of that help would be good for just anyone. But in regards to interpreters, interpreters are humans. We
They
are.
are.
Imagine. But we have to take care of ourselves. We have to take care of our body because I will tell you, if I am sick, if I've got an upset stomach, if I've got a cold or anything like that,
Hmm.
my job, oof, suffers. It's hard. And I imagine that's hard for anyone else to go to their job if they're not feeling well. But the interpreting process is a mental load, a
Oh, yeah.
physical, emotional load, all in one
Hmm.
assignment. So, more and more, I guess just the general public, but interpreting field as well, we're trying to take care of our bodies and ourselves more, our minds, our hearts, our emotional selves, and all of that. Because
Spiritual
that will,
self. Yeah.
yeah, that will help the interpreting process and help the experience overall just be better off. And that's honestly one of the reasons I wanted to start this podcast to have these types of conversations to get the word out of folks, hey, you're not alone in this
Hmm.
conversation.
Yeah. You know what? You saying that, it actually makes me think of a time. So I was formerly a teacher, which feels like that was another
Right.
lifetime ago.
Deaf school, yeah.
Yeah. So I was a teacher, going to school, showing up in that space. And I feel like in that field, you're providing a service. Like as a teacher, you are serving the people. And it's the same thing for interpreters, right? You are serving the people. And that is a very social job, right? And you're taking on a lot of these different energies. And your brain, and you have to filter out what is coming through.
Mm-hmm.
And
In
also,
your
yeah, coming
body.
through your body. Yeah. Those energies are passing through you, right? Because if you're interpreting with a client or for some kind of, I don't know, hearing professional or something, and they have really strong energy, right? How are you going to filter that out and then also interpret that to facilitate, to the client, but not allowing that to drain you
Mm-hmm.
along in that process with that energy, right? Because that energy has to pass through you as you facilitate.
Quite literally, in my ear, into my brain, processed through my body and out my hands or my mouth. And then I essentially am acting. I'm becoming that person, showing all of the emotions that they want to portray. And I can't
Right.
fake it. It has to physically go through my body. So I suppose what would you do
Right.
to help people, interpreters, one, maybe set up sort of some sort of force field or something around us to protect us. At the same
Yeah.
time, we still have to do our job. Ugh,
Protect your work.
right. It's hard to do both.
Yeah. And I think it's possible to do both. I think one thing people typically struggle with just in general is feeling like, okay, it's hard or it's impossible to hold space for, two things at
Right,
once, right? That duality, being happy and sad at the same time, loving and grieving at the same time, feeling like those are,
right.
opposite of each other,
All
but
at the
truly
same
they're,
time.
yeah, they're a mixture of each other. And I know you had mentioned, okay, how do you provide a protective, shield about yourself, but still facilitate and do your job? And I think that's something that you can absolutely do. And I think you can call on herbs. I think, I always talk about, my health and things like that, but, gardening and herbs, that's one of the reasons I was actually called to this type of work is because they have so much medicine, just intrinsically so much wisdom and so many messages for us. And they have just a lot of things to teach us. We look to plants and often nature just in general, and I could go on and on about nature, right,
Oh
for like
yeah.
another 90 minutes.
There's so much we're already learning from nature. So much
So
we
much.
don't even know the half of it.
Right. We're barely pricking the surface here. Yeah. But nature in general is something we can learn from. And so plants and herbs, and there's also actually another facet of that, which is flower essences.
Mm. And which is
Mhm.
what?
Yeah. So flower essences are vibrational, vibrational energy, medicine, wisdom, messaging. They're the blueprint, so to speak, of a flower. Um, Not the essence. You make the essence actually from the flower, so the flower is the blueprint.
Hmm.
But there are so many flowers, and right, flowers are such a unique, beautiful expression, right? This is when the plant has reached the end of their life cycle. They have gone through the entirety of that cycle, and now they have made a flower and blossomed a flower. And so that's such a gift to the universe, right? They're colorful, they're shapely. And once you put that flower into water, then the water is actually going to change. The structure of the water is literally going to change, right? Because water holds memory. Yeah, and we can see that. That's something that's visible with, a handy, technical microscope. But
Hmm.
that water is going to change. It holds memories, it holds different stories, really. Like, right, if you're talking about bodies of water, an ocean or a river, right? Those are two totally different bodies of water, and they hold different space, right? And so the flower essence is how you transmit that information, right? The flower dipped in the water becomes the flower essence itself.
Mm.
And then once you
Drink
drink
it.
that,
Yeah.
yeah, it kind of by osmosis passes through your body and, through the water in your body passes along that information. And so flower essences are just an additional layer of, that growing and evolving and that transformation to be your higher self. But sorry, what were you going to say?
Yeah, well, flower essences can help me with what essentially? So while I'm on my job or my life or all the above, as an interpreter, as we said before, information is passing through our bodies, that is filtered through our brains, our hearts, our hands, and things like that, plus other things that may stick and stay that I want to be released and
Mm,
out of me, and that
hmm.
energy to be sloughed off after a job.
To be
Yeah.
cleansed.
Flower essence can help with that.
Yeah. I mean, one flower essence that just comes to mind for cleansing properties, actually, a few come to mind initially. But I mean, just to start us off with sagebrush,
Yeah,
which is really simple, right? I think everyone in 2025, the year
of
2025,
course.
go sage yourself.
We got to smudge.
Smudge,
Yes.
exactly.
But this is then put in water.
Correct. Yep. The sagebrush is put into water. Yep. And that has got internal cleansing properties.
Ah,
Yeah, it's like an internal smudge. It's accessible, it's easy. If you're on the job, it's not like you can just light some sage and smudge yourself in between jobs.
I can't shove that sage in my areas. Yes.
Right. So you can take that, in a tincture. You can also take
Nice.
it in a spray.
Nice.
So this is a perfect example. So you've got this is a little bit bigger, but I also make smaller ones, something that's a little bit more accessible. It fits in your car, fits in your purse, something you can take with you on the go. And the flower essence sprays are still very effective, right? Our pores are just going to absorb and soak all that goodness up. And you can also take it via tincture, just a straight tincture is another option. So sagebrush, as I mentioned, but also chaparral. That's another flower essence that comes to mind. That is a very cathartic, cleansing herb. That's for something really just seriously negative energy or something that is just a bit just fucked up. If it's just messed with your psyche, chaparral is a really good option. And then if you're thinking about maybe like preventative, if you want to, before you even go into a job, using garlic flower
Of course. Well,
essence.
that makes sense. A barrier. Yeah.
Right.
Well, I stink.
Yeah.
Garlic.
No,
Okay.
no,
I'm spraying myself with some beautiful garlic, of course. I mean, people will stay
no, no,
away.
no.
People, it will be kept away.
Yeah, true. But garlic flower essence, I actually really like to think garlic flower essence, or it's this preventative, it's against this vampiric energy, right?
Yes. Energy suck.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, the draining energy suck.
And I feel like sometimes in interpreting jobs, sometimes, and it's not a fault of anyone else, but because we are the vessel in this instance, we
Hmm.
are not a human in that moment. Essentially, we're kind of a conduit. We are energy does get drained from us. So I like the idea of garlic. That's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, garlic. Garlic also mixed with pink yarrow. Oh,
Mm.
that is such a lovely combination. It's perfect for interpreters, right? Because when you're talking about you're loaning out your vessel, you're talking about, someone is right for that time period, you're loaning yourself out. And then when, that vessel is no longer being used and you come back to you thinking about like processing all of that information, what has just happened, and maybe you couldn't process it in the moment, but thinking about afterwards, okay, everything's coming back to you.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah, I'm sure you feel all sorts of different stuff.
So people use flower essences in general, tincture, spray, whatever. And
Mhm.
will I actually feel anything, or is it more of a mindset, or I don't know, or both?
Yeah, people call flower essences a
Eh,
placebo, quote unquote, at
yeah,
times, but there are studies, there are research, right? There are these supportive, studies, but it is kind of a fine line between what is real and what is not. Uh,
yeah. People carry crystals with them, and there's studies that crystals have changed the chemical energies in your body, and
Right.
I imagine it's similar, that type of thing.
Exactly. Exactly. Thinking about, okay, what calls me to this flower essence and this truth? I mean, and the thing for me that sold me on flower essences is that it actually changed the water structure. That I was sold after
Mm,
that.
mm,
Totally sold. And pink yarrow is one of those energetic, protective herbs. It provides kind of a dome around you. And some people, who are able to just call on that energy, to call to have that kind of protective dome. People who are on more of like the spiritual, more extreme end of that spectrum can maybe do that. But I typically, for me, getting support with that, I use Pink Yarrow when I'm going to sit in session with my clients because
mm,
afterwards, if I have an in-person or telehealth session, sometimes, we're talking about really sensitive things. We're talking about, topics. We're going deep and we're doing, trauma work. And I'm holding that space for this person to
hmm.
yeah, it just can be draining. I can be really tired after a session. But if I take some pink yarrow and after I do a client session, I notice that I'm okay, I'm fine. But when I
Interesting.
forget to use that, I am tired. I need a nap. But when I do, I feel good. And so that to me, I swear by pink yarrow.
And that's one tool in your tool bag of flower essence that you could use. The umbrella word of, or vicarious trauma, or us holding some shit that's not ours, we could use flower essence. But then you have tinctures, you have, I mean, other ways of like using the earthly elements to, I don't know.
Yeah.
Got a salt lamp on my desk, different things like that. I'm sure you've got all these things. I don't you have to sh you don't have to share all your secrets. People got to come see you and pay for your wisdom, but just what are like some other practices or things we could use as interpreters?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, we've got a whole toolkit here. But no, I'm
Yes.
always learning, right? I'm always adding to this repertoire. And so I think, at this time in my life, pink yarrow really is effective for me. And then maybe later down the line, things change and it isn't, right? We're never going to be just static. We're always going to be evolving and changing. I do have some tinctures here with me that I'd be happy to show you. These are things that you can actually buy on my website. These are accessible. These are, yeah, ready to order if you want some support.
What is a tincture? What does that mean for folks?
Here they are.
And this is what I drip into my mouth, but like, what is that?
Yeah, so these are plant extracts of different herbs. And these different herbs have different scientific functions and what they do in the body. As I mentioned earlier, right, the nervous system for me, right, if I get anxious easily, or sometimes I'm very go go go. I'm in this really hyper, space, and so sometimes I'm just I've got all of these, external or internal stimuli. And so tinctures, sorry, that was a little bit of an aside, but what are tinctures? So tinctures are plant extracts. These are, this is a set of herbs within water and alcohol. And so typically, so it's a water alcohol mix, that's the base. And this is the hydroethanic, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, liquid. And so it's water and alcohol mixed together. And they're going to actually extract different properties from the plant, just different chemicals. So maybe these will, some herbs will extract well in water, some will extract well in alcohol. And so we have a mix of both. I have some tinctures that don't have any alcohol. They're glycerin based or vinegar based, although most of my tinctures you'll see are water alcohol based. Some really support the nervous system just in terms of, stress resiliency, and that just provides you extra support on managing your stress, right? This is like talking about how big is your boat in the, vast world, or, this ocean, right?
Yeah.
Are you in just a little mini raft?
Am I
Or are
getting
you in
rocked? Right.
right, getting
I like
rocked?
that. Yeah. Well, and tying that back to, okay, yes, we filter all this stuff out as interpreters, but in terms of stressful situations, emotional
Yeah,
situations, interpreting is hard. We want to do good.
it is
We
hard.
want to kind of be on and perfect, whether we have a microphone in front of an audience or we're in a doctor's appointment. But I'd say interpreting in general, no matter how long you've been interpreting, you feel some sort of nerves and stress. Um, Even I'm almost at 20 years of work. Every job I feel a little bit of like, ooh, okay, here we go. I better get this right. I
Yeah, and I think that
care.
has, yeah, I think that has a lot to do with that, yeah, the expectation.
Right. I don't want to fuck this up. I care. I know it's the responsibility
You
of this
care.
communication is on me. And what, 99% of the time, even if you shared all the information, the unknown is going to happen in that job. So there's a lot of stress.
Yeah, you care,
Yeah.
you want to show the right message, or convey the right message.
So with tincture, in terms of stress, anxiety, all of those feelings encompassed in that, I have to manage all these feelings within myself because it's not your fucking problem that I'm stressed, Michelle. It's not anyone's problem. They are there for their thing, and I am to control my stuff. So, whether that be a tincture or what else could people use to manage maybe an acute thing? I'm going to take this tincture or something before I go into a
Hmm.
job, and maybe long-term stuff as well. I know, leading you right into it.
Yes, I like your question. I've got the perfect thing. Speaking of acute use, and I want to back up just a moment in talking about stress management and how to manage that for yourself, right? When you need to be in this ideal mental state, this peak emotional state. You have to be on, you have to be motherfucking on, right? Everything,
On.
everything is going to follow that, right? And so if you are not in a place of, where you feel like you're able to manage these things, right? Things are going to go awry.
Mhm.
And I think that's part of the reason why, and we have some interpreters who've been doing this for like 20 or 30 years who still get nervous because who knows what that day looks like.
And Michelle, we're friends. You've seen me. I've had some rough days and I was not on. We can talk about that later, but if you're comfortable with that person, it may be helpful to say, "Woo, having an off day. Sorry." But sometimes that's not something you can disclose. You're on stage, and these
Hmm.
people honestly just don't care if my dog just died. They don't care if I fought with my husband before this job. So that's one thing I think with this job, and granted, many other jobs, we are holding our stuff kind of deep down and holding our shit ignoring it essentially in that moment to get through this job. And then sometimes do we even pull that stuff back out? And do we address the
Hmm.
stuff or do we continue to shove that down further? So,
Yeah, I think the beauty of that, I don't even know what you call that, right? It's like you're it's like as you just said, right? So the two of us are friends and the two of us also work together in a professional capacity, and our ability to be authentic
yeah,
and open with
open.
each other.
Mhm.
Yeah. And not all places and not all workplaces are like that. I know my workplace, I do actually work part-time at an apothecary. And really, it is such a beautiful workspace. Even though all of them are hearing, it doesn't matter to me. They're such good people and they're so inviting, right? I can show up as myself, fully myself. If I'm, if life is fucked up and a mess, I can just be open with them about that. And that's something that I just cherish. Right. And I think a lot of the other, other aspects and jobs are not like that.
I imagine when you meet patients, Michelle's got to be put aside. You have to meet those patients
Hmm.
in that way or clients. What are some
Completely.
tools or things that you'd give folks for that?
Yes, yes, yes. Okay, back to this. So again, for the acute usage, like if you're
Right
like, fuck,
now.
I need something right now. Yes, right
Oh,
now. I need to get in alignment. I need to get it together right now. This is what I would recommend.
good flower vibes.
Good flower vibes. Yep. And this is
You've
full of adaptogens.
you've made this. Okay.
Yes, all of these I've made. Yep, all of these tinctures.
And you've grown many of the herbs that are in it, correct?
I
Most?
have.
Yes, you've got a good setup.
Yes. Yeah. I've got, like a cute little setup here. I've got 6 garden beds set up. And I do try my best to grow my own stuff. I also have to share this space with my partner for his vegetables, other things, especially his basil plant.
Fine.
But yeah, this good flower vibes is something that's really quick. This, I'll be honest, does not have the best taste.
My friend, none of them taste good. Any of them. You,
Yeah,
you like it. I do not.
they are strong. Um, I typically sometimes I'll just like dilute it in water. It's an acquired taste. Okay. This is not something you just readily have. Taking a tincture directly is a little bit rough, so you can always just put it in a little bit of water and take it that way. But the good flower vibes, that is all of like my service worker friends, my teachers, and yeah, I think interpreters. Yeah, that would also apply to interpreters. They would fit this bill well. But they depend on this. They really use this.
What's in this tincture?
This has really strong nervines. So these are herbs that respond to the nervous system directly, just kind of if you're in an elevated space, it will bring you back down. So your cells, if you are in a state of total disarray and you are just super elevated, and sometimes that happens, right? In your mind and in your body, you're just in an elevated state, and this will help you kind of bring it back down. This has got ashwagandha. This also has linden, blue vervine. There's 4 just simple herbs in this one, and it works really well. So maybe like 5 minutes, 15 minutes before I have a meeting or I have a session or something like that, I take this, I go into session or into that meeting, and I am feeling good. I am feeling chill. And it just feels like you're in control. You've got your shit together. And this is something that works really quickly. This is something you can take daily to increase your stress management. And then also, yeah, ride the Milky Way, excuse me.
Milky Way. Ah,
Yeah. So this is made with milky oat tops. And this is like food. This is really deep, nourishing, um, just food for your nervous cells, just getting them back to a state of being replete, having space to handle all of life's shit and all of the stress that comes along with it.
can I take both of those and be high as fucking chill and just handle everything? Cool.
Thanks, chillin', you sure can. Milky oat tops, I really love this just because it has a direct connection being able to cancel out the cortisol that's found in your body, which is right, that stress hormone that is released in your body. So if your cortisol is high and you want to bring that down, you kind of want to cancel that out, level that out. Or if there's like inflammation in the body, that obviously is going to lead to a lot of other things. But these are the two tinctures that I typically call on and go to reduce anxiety and to, just provide this fast acting and natural approach just for, if you're going into work. This is something you're going into, if you're obviously you guys are as interpreters doing the universe's work, providing access to folks, but really, you know, you're also human. And wow,
Well, and so you've got tinctures. What else? What else do you have that could help me? I've got maybe a tea,
definitely some
uh,
teas.
a lot related with like I said, earth element stuff. You've done a whole course related with that. So I know there's a lot more things that can help. Food for interpreters.
Yeah, food, teas.
Yeah.
Also, right, you talk about like the elements. So the teas that I have here, I would say I have a tea. Most of these are just supporting your basic needs, right? These basic human needs. You need to sleep, you need to poop, you need to be hydrated, right?
And all of that's tied together. Yeah, and that's all related with then causes worse stress if that's not aligned, and how I then
Right.
do my job and how well I perform. Yeah.
Yeah, on that holistic level, like being healthy. We need to not be sick, right? If you have a cold or respiratory issues, I've got a tea to just help support that. And also, I think it depends on what is the root cause of your stress. I think oftentimes people want to point to an external factor to, say this is my job is causing me this stress
They
and kind of,
caused it. Yeah.
yeah, directing that outward. But I think, yeah, people typically don't realize that that can be manifested from within.
Hmm.
Yeah. And so if your gut health is poor, you're going to be more stressed, right? You're going to be way more stressed. If your gut is inflamed, and I do have a belly tea for that, but if your sleep is poor, if your sleep quality is just not that great, if you're not sleeping enough hours each night, you're going to be more stressed the next day as a result, right? Your tolerance for stress is going to be totally depleted just from the start of the day.
And I can attest that the tea stuff definitely has a huge impact on my body. I did stuff related with my period and menstruation, things like that. And that tea definitely, I felt it. I wondered if I would drink all this tea and I'd feel nothing and I'd feel no effect. But by golly, whew, I did. And I'm sure that does for other people in different ways. So I'll just say that about the tea.
Yeah. And there's one tea that I have that's called Forever in Our Hearts Blend. And I do have some other tinctures that are more focused specifically on the heart of your anxiety, right? If your anxiety lives in your heart, or if you have a nervous heart or nervous chest, right? If your anxiety, is that presenting in your stomach, in your chest, in your shoulders, in your head, in your neck, right? Where is this showing up for you? And if it's in your chest or in your heart, due to the political climate that we're currently all in, right? In the world, just the changes and all that we're experiencing right now. And I shouldn't say just this year, but it's been like this for quite a while now. But if that is showing up in your heart, then this heart tea is really, it's just amending restorative. It just, there's no, if you're feeling unsure, if you're feeling this, this sense of just, yeah, uncertainty, that this tea will help you just kind of stand in your confidence and kind of stand in your power. And I think, right, there's an alignment with that emotional and physical heart as well as your confidence and your, resiliency and your ability to just stand in your confidence. And so I think internally, if your physical and mental and emotional state are good, then your also physical and external state will be good as well.
Yeah, well, when it comes to like, the physical aspects you're saying, your bowel movements, your heart, your actual physical things, I know often you talked about flower essence can more lean towards the emotional, but what do I do when I just interpreted for someone and they died in front of me? This has happened 2 times in my career now. What do we do if I'm interpreting you have cancer and emotion is very high in the room. We as interpreters feel in that moment, we feel and care so much. And it's not our place to often sometimes feel with these people in that moment. Or we also don't learn anything later. We don't get to resolve and wrap up those feelings in any sort of way. We leave that assignment and we're left with what happened. And yeah, the
Mm.
emotional part of we've already kind of talked about that, like of reading ourselves of other energy, but what can help with the emotional aspect? Yeah, I guess that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, the emotional aspect of it.
Yeah, all of it's tied together right now.
Right. So the emotional aspect and emotion, I don't know if I've told you this just as a friend, but this was something totally profound to me. So emotion is short for energy in motion.
Right.
Yes.
That's what they're always saying, like, let emotions move through. Let them move through. Don't hold them in motion. I
Right.
love
Let them flow
that.
through. Yeah, that really resonated with me. I read about that and I was like, what?
Duh. Right? Like, of course. Duh. We now
Right,
know.
exactly.
Yeah.
So holding space and as an interpreter, being able to do that. And you don't want to hold those things, or after you do that work, you still need that space for yourself to then process what you just experienced and what just happened, right? What kind of resolution, right? You have to be able to give that to yourself. If you're not getting it from, the environment, from your job, then that's something, yeah, you have to be able to do for yourself.
I mean, like the flower essence is more emotional aspect. I remember you mentioned that.
Yeah, this winter warmer tincture, this is something I really love. And this is so cute. Look at this little guy.
Cute.
This is good for the circulatory system, just circulatory health. If you have high blood pressure or, cold hands and feet, anything cardiovascular, right? Just kind of pumping that blood through. And I've also found that this tincture really does help to move energy as well. And trying to explain this to people, to the muggles of the world is is really difficult, right? How just trying to explain how this scientifically works. I don't have the exact words to explain how this happens, but the wisdom,
Magic. Magic,
yes,
magic.
magic. Yes. This is not a placebo. This is not, fake, right? This is something that happens in your body. And so when I take this and I feel that kind of that movement, if I am kind of ruminating on something, then I'm able to let that go. There's, I'm able to find kind of peace within this world, because the world is not going to stop us.
So herbs, plants, and all of that. I mean, are any of these tied with chakra work? If I've got stuff stuck in my heart chakra from my job last week or something, and often I do maybe put my hands on my throat when I'm about to go in and do an interpreting job, whether I'm voicing or signing, because that's all communication, but that's all coming from
Yeah.
that throat chakra. I'm sure some herbs do relate with the chakras to help open or protect or close. Is that related?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Right. We have our chakras and right, the power of color, right? How that works. We have our red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, right? And really, I think sometimes there's some things that don't need to be over explained. We've got an herb that is pink, so you can assume that,
Mm,
yeah,
we'll go
that
with
that
that
is
chakra.
related,
Yeah.
right? And those are all aligned and linked up. When you talk about throat herbs, that is a little bit weird just because, so when you think about the throat, then in an herbalist, herbalist view, you would think about the lungs, breathing,
Hmm.
right? That is what we typically associate with the throat. And I am not, an expert on chakras by any means, but I do have some experience just making formulas for some clients, and these clients who are asking for, maybe more solar plexus. They want, more brightness, say. So I'm looking for yellow flowers or flowers that embody that. And so I think, making sure that those colors align with what someone's looking for is really important.
Yeah, and I guess can you give a little summary of what you and Summer did? I know you have a course that I watched myself, and so many parts of it could be applicable and helpful to interpreters. Just give a little basic promo of what you guys covered in this and why folks should check it out.
Okay.
Yeah, we've got about 20 minutes, so we got time. So go ahead and okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so Summer and I, the two of us, collaborated on this. So really, a lot of things that I am doing in my work and Summer is doing in their work, we noticed some kind of commonalities and just some similarities that we thought were really cool. Um, and my work with vitalism and what that means is just returning back to our most natural state of being.
Naked, running through the woods free. Yes.
That's right, our bare self. eh, and now we're living in this modern day, right? So we're stuck. We're stuck with our society, and how it's currently, you know, and how it currently is. And so practicing vitalism, that really, gets us to thinking about our best self, our whole self. Also, living within this society and trying to work with that. And then Summer's work with rewilding, and rewilding and vitalism, yeah, just go
Like,
hand in hand.
yeah.
And so we wanted to provide just an introduction about how to feel your best, how to feel your healthiest, um, by following your body's innate wisdom and your intuition, right? Because your body is in constant communication with you all day, every day, right? And if you suppress those things, right, and you say, okay, this is not the time, this is not the place for this communication to be, shared with me.
I mean, as interpreters, I feel like when our body is communicating with us, I feel like sometimes we ignore it hardcore. And honestly, it's because we aren't allowed in that moment or we don't have a choice to pay attention, attend to our body. I mean, we do, but that's a whole other reason I wanted to talk about this on the podcast. I don't disempowered and I don't
Detached.
right. I don't want to go, well, I can't do these things. Obviously, during the middle of a job, Andrea's not going to overstep her bounds and insert herself. No, but maybe sitting for 4 hours is not working for my body. I can say, do you mind if I stand up? And I'm like, oh, people
Right.
don't really care. That's an
Yeah.
aside. But yeah, body's communicating with us. I feel like we need a little bit of a reminder and wake up call to listen to my body. My
Yes.
body is my job at this moment, and I want to do my job well for a long time.
Yes.
The course touches on all that.
Yeah, the online course. Yeah. Talk about just embodying that mind body, just being fully in your body and doing just really an honest check-in with yourself. Like we talked about earlier, what do you need in that very moment? And that could look very different, than what you need in a minute from now, right? Or the next minute after that. But outside of your interpreting job, this course would be such a great opportunity to just reconnect, right? In your home, in your body. And this course also you as CEU accredited.
It does have CEUs. And our
CEUs,
job is our body, and our body is our job. So I don't know. It just makes perfect
right,
sense.
right.
All
They're
encompassing.
intertwined.
Ugh.
Yep. And CEU is just, yeah, an added bonus. And so the online course, it will cover, like as we had talked about, right, the elements of the earth, those elemental pieces, right? We have water, air, fire, and earth. And this could be an entire other podcast on just that one topic of the elements alone, but all of the wisdom, excuse me, that we can find in just feeding the fire within us or being the water within us, right? So those different aspects and elements really, I think just in summary, it's fully captioned. There is voiceover, and then also myself and Summer will both be signing as we're both deaf. But it is a self-paced course And it's really nice that you can, something that you can do on your own time with your interpreter friends and say, hey, how you doing with it? It's
Get a
really
discussion
fun.
group, right? Talk to people to work through your stuff.
Absolutely. Do that. It's so fun.
I love
Yeah,
it.
I would love for all interpreters to have the opportunity to take this. This is a real gift, truly, and not only to the interpreting community, but to the community as a whole, right? And talking about who is in the community, interpreters are a part of this community, a part of our community, just the ASL signing community.
You want us to take care of ourselves so we can do our job and do it well.
Right, right, completely.
Which, good segue, leads me to I've got a deaf person here. You're my friend. I want to pick your brain and ask you questions from your perspective. Fully aware that I am one of your interpreters and have been and will be probably your interpreter for things.
For sure.
Um, I just always want to ask deaf people. We want people your perspective. Rare do interpreters get the chance to ask, what do you want us to know? Hey, deaf people, what do you want to tell the interpreting community? What makes you happy about interpreters? What makes you mad about interpreters? What's your view on interpreters? Do you have a view? Do you care? Or like, we just don't get to have those frank conversations that often. Instead, deaf people are probably bitching about us behind closed doors, as are interpreters bitching about deaf people, agencies, and each other behind closed doors, but never together. So there's so many things that could be brought to the table from both sides, and mutual respect and conversation could be had. So I just wanted to bring that up and ask.
Yeah.
Where do I even ask? Ask. I asked you 900 questions.
Well, okay, so let's start here. So I have used interpreters my whole life, and it's hard to really like pinpoint or
Right. So varied.
so varied, right? You have interpreters who are doing that one thing, and then the other interpreter is, doing that same thing, but this interpreter just happens to be better or just
Hmm.
happens to be more likable, you know? And then it's a human, there's a human element to that.
With anything, right. It's,
Goes
I
both
know it's
ways.
hard.
And interpreters, right? I really value and appreciate interpreters and the work that they're doing. I think one thing I will say, lately I have been having more conversations with my friends just about interpreters, and I think you already know this, right? But interpreters who are becoming famous in their own right. Or interpreters, who are interpreting for a deaf person, and then this deaf person happens to have a really large following. And then, this person is kind of like a celebrity. And
They
then the
stay in
interpreter
front.
is, yeah,
Yeah.
always with them. And then, as this interpreter goes off, into their, career, as this kind of comes to an end, then they start to be more picky, or they start to be more, choosy about what interpreter, assignments they're taking. And they're not taking these assignments with grassroots or the community members.
They want that fancy, fun job that eyes will be on. Yeah.
Yeah, they want, yeah, the where eyes will be on them. And we're seeing these, same interpreters who are showing up in these, specific spaces to do that work.
Mm, I know what you mean.
Yeah, and which is fine, right? This is how you live your life, and that's okay. But I think it becomes there's a line there, right? Are you doing what you're doing for the heart, or for, for the an intent of bridging the gap between languages, of bringing in this community, bringing accessibility to this community, or is it just for yourself? And so I think another representation of that is we see interpreters, and we've talked about this, right? Interpreters who kind of become this person, right? They take on the emotion and, all of the things that come along with it. And then I think some interpreters take that, I think, just a bit too far, right? It becomes this theatrical interpretation, and they have the spotlight on them. And
That
hearing interpreters know that all eyes are on them, that hearing people are totally enamored with that. And so they really turn it up a notch in terms of their interpretation. And so looking for that attention.
And you as a deaf person can feel that nuance. You know it's
Yeah,
happening when that's turned up a notch. Hearing people aren't seeing that because they're just seeing a signer on stage or
right.
whatever. But you have worked with so many, that's a
And your
bit
team
much.
interpreter sees.
Right, a bit much.
Yeah,
Mm,
right. Tone it down.
yeah.
And that to me is just like, I just honestly, I feel like I'm seeing that 8 out of 10 times I see an interpreter. I see an interpreter interpreting in a manner that is like theatrical. And that is a serious problem, right? This is not just,
Much.
it's too much. Right. I think there's a spectrum, right? What kind of day is this interpreter having, right? Is this their fourth or fifth interpreting assignment in the day, or is it their first, right? I don't know. That's something that I'm not, going to be privy to as a consumer, but I just, one thing that just I don't appreciate, like when interpreters, they get interest from other hearing people who are at the same event. They're like, oh, hey, how did you get involved in signing? Like, how did you start this? And I think it's important for the interpreter to interpret, and obviously you can answer that question in passing, and if it's in passing, I think that's totally fine, but it becomes not fine. It becomes a problem when it just goes on and on and on, and it affects then my access. I basically now lost my interpreter for the 5-minute conversation that they're having with some other hearing participant. And is that something that could potentially be held off until maybe after the assignment or after the job? And so that's something that I think, interpreters are humans and they have to be humans in that way. And right, and there's going to be some situations, if you want to on break talk with somebody, I think that's fine. I don't know.
Yeah, it's the interpreter kind of taking the spotlight over the deaf person that's hard. When they're like, "Oh, I'm getting attention. I like that." Agreed. I don't that part's hard for me and I see it as well. And I'll just be vulnerable that doing this podcast for me is a little bit hard for that reason. I don't want all of this to ever be viewed as a way of like, look at me at all. You know what I mean? And
No.
I know.
You don't want it to be misconstrued in that way. Yeah. Or you don't want to be misunderstood, right?
Mhm.
By somebody, being like, oh, hey, look at me, right? You don't want to be misunderstood in that way. But I don't think you have anything to worry about, right? But I don't know how this is going to be received by other interpreters or other members of the community. I think this should be, we should be all very invested in the conversations that are happening here, right? Because how and where else does this type of thing happen, right? Is there even a space? I guess parking lots, but
Right, unless you become friends with deaf people or yeah, I just
right.
in what space would we have deaf folks who are comfortable enough to truly talk about what they want from interpreters and having interpreters there in the room and truly bare their soul honesty? I mean, I understand we are not privy to the conversations that are had among deaf people about interpreters, and I'm sure we're not supposed to be. So, I, you have to then be vulnerable to tell us interpreters, and then you have to see me the next day, that type of thing. So, I answered my own question when I asked you.
Well, right.
Yeah.
I think it's like boundaries are hard, right? We maybe half of us grew up with good teachers, people who, taught us how to set really good boundaries, and I think half of us did not.
Well, what did you
And
learn? What did you learn about interpreters yourself? I remember you mentioned something about your parents telling you something.
yeah, so I grew up thinking that interpreters were not supposed to have feelings. They were not supposed to think, you know.
Conduits.
Right. I was told that they're just robots. I mean, and I mean literal robots. That was what was conveyed to me. They're like, we don't care if the interpreters feel good. We don't care if they have a bad day. They're just here to do their job. No worries.
I mean, soon AI will be that for you. You'll be all right
Oh
then.
my God.
Yeah?
AI still can't even do the manual alphabet. So no.
Right. Ugh,
Finger spelling is already an issue with most interpreters. And then you add AI finger spelling. No.
seriously.
Yeah. And I see the AI hand shapes, it's all fucked up. That is still a very big issue. But yeah, I mean, thinking about interpreters as robots and just kind of disregarding them as, a person. I would say like my parents, my teachers, it was something that was taught to me, that interpreters are robots. And then I remember, like, my parents or other deaf people or other deaf adults were out at social gatherings. And then, we see all of these hearing people who are, having these conversations or, talking with interpreters and treating interpreters like their friends, like their BFFs. And, maybe you know more about this interpreter's life than, I don't know, your own second cousin or your aunt, or how your aunt's doing. You have
Mhm.
these like deep relationships with these interpreters. And so, I was taught that there was this boundary that, that those boundaries are not clear. An interpreter at a doctor's office is a robot, and then at your uncle's wedding, they're your best friend. And so I think those weird separations.
I think I would imagine it's pretty common, a mindset of deaf people and a mindset of interpreters of, wait, we're friends here? No, wait, be in robot role. No, we're friends now.
Yes,
And it's jarring and hard to figure out, but I guess that's just the human service aspect of this work.
the human aspect. Yeah. And I think it's so, though, important for us to have this kind of conversation, right? Because without this space, this podcast, like you said, like, in what space would deaf people actually feel comfortable to share and be vulnerable in these ways, even in little ways, right? I think throughout, the interpreting training programs and things like that, myself as a deaf consumer, right? I didn't get any kind sort of training or any sort of like manual in how to use interpreters, the do's and don'ts, right? I didn't get anything like that. So I think that there's like the crossover between these things, these two spaces are not happening.
NAD, RID. I know those organizations are having those conversations, workshops, but right, these
Those
personal,
are so
right,
formal.
right.
Yeah.
How can we work I mean, you and I worked together for a little over 2 years, all day, some days. We became friends. And like you said, with boundaries, it can be tough because, okay, oh, today Michelle's grouchy, or oh, Andrea's grouchy, or my team is a little bit grouchy today. Ooh, um, it takes a lot of knowing and taking care of my own shit to handle these situations, especially when it comes to designated interpreter status. When I'm with this person for a very long time, you got to know yourself. You got to read the fucking room to feel people out. It's a lot.
And not only, right, reading the room, but also the boundaries. Like, okay, in this moment, do I get to be Andrea? Or in this moment, do I get to be, okay, no, 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 I actually need to stay in this role as an interpreter. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's the same thing with me, right? When I'm staying in my role as a consumer, or am I staying in, the space of just being me, Michelle?
Well, and we're in that space. So, like, it's a classroom. You want to talk with classmates and peers, but they know us as well because I'm there. And I don't want to be an asshole and just, sorry, I am the interpreter. I can't talk with you. Of course, I'm going to be friendly and kind. That's a whole other topic of how to behave and dance that boundary line of friendship and
Yeah.
work and all that. It's hard. It's
It's a
hard.
big topic.
It's just something that I just want to put out for folks to be aware of. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big topic. I think for me, it's hard because, like you mentioned previously, right? Like in the world, so like in the herbalist community that I'm in, I think it's very understanding. Like everyone, is human, everyone has needs. Um, and so I think I have become, that's a foundation, right, of who I am, right? Understanding and saying, oh, of course you're human, right? Of course.
Too flexible, though? Will it
Mm,
affect your access when you're too kind to the interpreter?
yeah, yes, it does. I have found myself, be bending over backwards for folks. I mean, like truly bending over backwards.
Yeah.
And so I think, because that's a value that I have, so a principle in my heart, right? If things are just like fucked up with my access, though, that's where I draw the line, right? I can be compassionate and empathetic for things, but if you're, impacting my access or if you have a deaf consumer, I think one thing about interpreters, like some interpreters think if they have some past experience. So, for example, right, if this interpreter has taught science in a past life, and then they're like, okay, well, at this point, that means that I am just blanketly qualified to be the interpreter for such and such space, so I can apply for this job. And that is not the case, right? And I think you have to be retrained as an interpreter in these specific fields over and over again, right?
They're different.
Retrained.
Having knowledge about something is very different than knowing the signs and
Yeah.
interpreting and translating that information.
Right. And that's where again, interpreters like right that perspective, the pride, the ego. Are you doing this for attention? Are you doing this for the intent of, like the integrity of the work? Is it the ego of knowing things, or is it being, an efficient interpreter and translator, communicator? Right? There's a difference in those two things. And I think it's a lot of ego work that interpreters have to do.
Big one.
Yeah. And I think also interpreters, they don't really have the opportunity to have these like formal educational spaces unless I guess they're taking CEU workshops or
Right.
courses.
Unless I decide to myself. Right.
Yeah. But typically the experience comes from this on the job training. It's like this acquisition as you go. Okay, I'm learning this scientific stuff on the job. And that to me something is that I like wonder about, right? Knowing I don't know how you as interpreters make sure that you are credible and you are qualified for this job, right? Because are you ever?
No, often either it's the extreme of end of pe how people think. They are cocky and they're like, okay, I got this. And they really don't know what they're doing. Or someone is really highly skilled and they're somehow uncertain of their skills. So I feel like it goes to either extreme, either you have too much confidence or not enough confidence to try anything. Some folks need to sit down and step out of some spaces. It's that middle ground that's pretty hard to find, that balance of figuring out ourselves. And yeah, interpreter training programs are already packing in language and the process of interpreting where they can't even touch on other subjects because there's no time in those programs. I would love if there were more workshops, but again, it depends on the people need to be interested to take these type of workshops and your type of course or any other type of course where they actually heal their stuff. Anywho, um, yeah, there in so many episodes, this is the topic that has come up over and over. Anyway, we have touched on anything and everything.
Yeah, I think we have. Let me look here.
Any last things you'd love to add or emphasize to folks?
Thank you. I guess just thinking, really, it's funny because I came into this podcast with, as a deaf consumer, this is what I want interpreters to do. And one of my initial thoughts coming into this is that I wanted people to take on more advocacy, right? Deaf people have to advocate for ourselves every single day, every fucking day, right? We show up to this space, we have to advocate for ourselves, and that is exhausting. And so if interpreters could be, real friends, I guess not friends, but if interpreters could be allies to support us in that advocacy, then obviously, right, the communication transparency, right, there has to have some sort of mutual agreement between the consumer and the interpreter about how they want to go about this kind of advocacy. But being here in this podcast, I think that interpreters are also really having to advocate a lot for themselves.
Yeah, I am learning that making this podcast and these episodes of, ooh, yes, folks do not understand our role which then
Right.
in turn affects the deaf person. So we are often advocating for ourselves as interpreters, literally in every situation. I'm not told enough information. I'm not ready for this. But you're right. Interpreters often have those conversations of how to be allies. And deaf people do provide workshops on that, but it is a weird, fuzzy line of, again, not everyone's got common sense. Common sense is not so common in terms of boundaries of what's too
Right.
much of an advocate or ally or not enough. But like you said, the transparency of like, do you want me to say something? Do you want to say something? Right.
Absolutely. Getting on the same page first. But I think, I mean, I am just astounded, right? What I've taken from this podcast is that you all have to advocate for yourselves. And I think that that's new for me. And I'm so grateful to just be more aware about this. And I'm just so grateful that you all have tools. And I hope that this was, beneficial for you all to learn about the tools that are, tinctures, teas, different products. And so I think that there are definitely tools. And I think the two of us have talked about this a lot.
Yes. Ooh, this was a good one. I'm excited for folks to listen to this one.
Yeah.
At the end of each episode, I always ask the guests to spotlight or highlight a deaf business or deaf organization. And I think it is apropos to highlight your business if you would like. What is the name of your business? How do people find you? And I will definitely put the website in the show notes if you could.
Yeah. So my business name is Bouquet of Basil Herbals. It is quite a long name. Yes, I know. My website is also bouquetofbasilherbals.com. Um, you can just go to my website, my email, all my contact information is there. If you're curious about teas, tinctures, any sort of body products, I have this arnica oil that is amazing for the hands. Lather
And
it
they can
on.
buy this stuff without becoming a client of yours, just directly. Mm.
Absolutely. Yep. Yep. If you're curious about my services, if you want to know more about what that looks like, about becoming a client, please do just, yeah, read about that on my website. I also provide flower essence consultation, as we talked about earlier in the episode. If you're facing some emotional things, or if you want more of a traditional herbalism, clinical setting, if you're, looking to work on some issues, you can always, look for consultations on my website.
Excited.
Yeah, and please do follow me on Instagram as well.
Same name?
Bouquet of Basil dot herbalist. Yeah. So
Herbals. Yeah.
and herbals, excuse me. So yeah, you can link to that in your show notes or whatever magic you can do.
Thanks so much, Michelle. This was so fun.
Yes. So it was so fun to just chat with you. I had a great time.
We could keep going. Thank you so much.
I know. Take care.